You are tired, but not from effort. You are tired from vigilance, from the constant scanning of the future, the replaying of the past, the silent rehearsals of what might go wrong and how you might prevent it. You plan, you anticipate, you brace yourself, not because you enjoy it, but because it feels responsible. Because somewhere along the way, control began to feel like safety. Yet notice what it has cost you. Your mind rarely rests in the present moment. Your body stays tense even in quiet rooms. Small uncertainties feel heavy, not because they are unbearable, but because you feel personally responsible for managing them. This is not chaos on the outside. This is pressure on the inside. What makes this exhaustion difficult to explain is that it looks like discipline. It looks like care. It looks like strength. You are not avoiding life. You are trying to manage it. And still, the more tightly you hold on, the more fragmented you feel. As if your attention is split into 1,000 pieces, each one guarding against a future that has not yet arrived. This is not a failure of character. It is a misunderstanding of where your power actually lives. When control is aimed outward, toward outcomes, people, and events, it quietly turns against you. It does not make you calmer, it makes you vigilant. It does not make you prepared, it makes you brittle. If this feels familiar, stay with me. Because what breaks you is not life itself, but the invisible burden of trying to command what was never yours to command. And once this is seen clearly, something begins to loosen, not outside of you, but within. The false promise of control. Why it feels necessary, but fails. Control does not begin as a mistake. It begins as a solution. When uncertainty appears, the mind searches for leverage. It tells you that if you think enough, plan enough, anticipate enough, you can prevent pain. Fear disguises itself as preparation, and responsibility slowly turns into compulsion. At first, this feels useful. You stay alert. You stay ahead. You believe that your vigilance is protecting you. But over time, something subtle happens. The mind stops distinguishing between what can be influenced and what can only be endured. Everything becomes your task. Every outcome feels personal. Every unknown feels urgent. This is where fragmentation begins. The mind loops because it is trying to resolve what cannot be resolved in advance. Emotions become volatile because they are responding to imagined futures as if they were present threats. Rest feels undeserved because control has convinced you that relaxing is the same as being careless. Nothing is wrong with you for falling into this pattern. It is a deeply human response to uncertainty, but it is also unsustainable. Control promises stability, while quietly multiplying tension. It asks you to carry a weight that no mind can carry without breaking into pieces. What makes this dangerous is not that control fails occasionally, but that it fails silently. You do not notice the damage until calm feels unfamiliar and stillness feels unsafe. And this is where the next shift must happen, not by trying harder, but by seeing more clearly where effort belongs. The invisible cost, how control fractures the inner world. There is a cost to control that rarely shows up in obvious ways. It does not announce itself as failure. It shows up as a constant low-grade tension, as the inability to fully arrive in a moment, even when nothing is wrong, as a mind that keeps working long after the problem has ended. When you try to control what lies beyond you, your attention fractures. Part of you is here, listening, speaking, functioning. Another part is already elsewhere, calculating outcomes, preparing defenses, rehearsing responses. You are never fully present because presence feels irresponsible when control has become your survival strategy. This is where emotional chaos is often misunderstood. It is not emotion itself that overwhelms you. It is emotion left without governance. Fear, frustration, and anticipation are natural responses to life. But when they are given authority over your judgment, they multiply. They begin reacting not to reality, but to interpretations layered on top of reality. You start noticing overreactions that do not feel like you. Small disruptions trigger disproportionate stress. Waiting becomes intolerable. Silence becomes uncomfortable. The mind keeps asking for certainty, and when it does not receive it, it produces tension instead. This is not weakness. It is the predictable result of asking the mind to do what it cannot do, which is control the uncontrollable. The deepest cost is internal division. One part of you knows this vigilance is exhausting. Another part insists it is necessary. And so a quiet conflict begins, not with the world, but within yourself. Life feels heavier, not because it has become harsher, but because you are carrying it in the wrong way. This is the point where most people either double down on control or collapse into resignation. But there is another path, one that does not demand more effort, only better direction. And that path begins with a simple but radical clarification of where power actually exists. The Stoic turning point, where power actually lives. There is a moment when effort must change direction, not because you are weak, but because you have been strong in the wrong place. This is where the Stoic shift begins, not as a rule imposed on you, but as a recognition that feels almost relieving once it is seen clearly. The Stoics made a precise distinction that cuts through mental chaos. Some things depend on you, and some things do not. Your judgments, your intentions, your responses, these belong to you. Outcomes, other people's choices, the passage of time, these do not. The mistake is not caring about what happens. The mistake is placing your sense of stability in what you cannot command. When this distinction becomes real, effort reorganizes itself. You stop forcing the world to cooperate with your expectations and begin governing the one domain that never leaves you, your faculty of reason. As described in Enchiridion of Epictetus, section 1, distress does not arise from events themselves, but from the judgments we form about them. This is not abstraction. It is practical leverage. Instead of asking how to control what happens next, the question becomes how to meet what happens next, without surrendering your composure. Thoughts are examined rather than obeyed. Reactions are paused rather than unleashed. You are not passive. You are precise. This is not giving up control, it is relocating it. And once this relocation begins, something changes immediately. The mind stops scattering itself across imagined futures and returns to the present, where action is actually possible. From here, acceptance stops feeling like loss and starts revealing itself as strength. Acceptance of fate, why resistance multiplies pain. Acceptance is often misunderstood because it is confused with approval. But the Stoics never asked you to like what happens. They asked you to stop arguing with what is already here. Resistance does not change reality. It only adds tension to it, and that tension is what turns difficulty into suffering. When you fight what cannot be altered, you create a second burden on top of the first. There is the event itself, and then there is the internal protest against it. The body tightens. The mind rehearses how things should have gone. Energy is spent demanding a different reality instead of meeting the one that exists. This is where pain multiplies. Marcus Aurelius spoke to himself about this in Meditations of Marcus Aurelius, Book 2, Paragraph 1, reminding that each morning brings people, events, and circumstances that will test patience and reason, and that none of them can harm the soul unless the soul grants permission. Fate, in this sense, is not a tyrant. It is the condition of the game you are already playing. Acceptance is cooperation with that condition. It means recognizing that life does not owe you predictability. It means understanding that your dignity does not depend on outcomes aligning with your preferences. When resistance softens, clarity returns. The mind becomes less reactive because it is no longer surprised by reality behaving like reality. This does not make you passive, it makes you efficient. Energy that was wasted on complaint is now available for response. And with this shift, something essential becomes possible: the ordering of emotion through reason, not by suppression, but by understanding. reason as order. How Stoics work with emotion, not against it. Many people believe the Stoics wanted to eliminate emotion. This misunderstanding alone has kept countless minds locked in unnecessary conflict. The Stoic aim was never numbness, it was clarity. Emotion was not treated as an enemy, but as raw energy that needed direction. Emotion becomes dangerous only when it takes command of judgment. Anger, fear, and desire are not problems by themselves, they are signals. But when they go unquestioned, they dictate actions that later feel foreign, impulsive, or regrettable. Reason exists to interrupt this chain, not to deny feeling, but to examine it. Seneca explained this with precision. In Letters from a Stoic by Seneca, letter 85, he made clear that the wise person feels emotion, but does not become it. Reason steps in like a steady hand, asking what this emotion is responding to, whether the judgment behind it is accurate, and whether the reaction serves virtue or undermines it. This is how order is restored, not by pushing emotions down, but by bringing them into awareness. Fear is questioned. Anger is slowed. Desire is measured. Once examined, emotion loses its power to overwhelm. It is no longer chaos. It becomes information. When reason resumes its role, you do not lose sensitivity. You gain agency. You're no longer dragged by inner storms. You navigate them. And this prepares the ground for the deepest change of all, the quiet internal shift that does not announce itself, but reshapes how you meet everything that follows. The internal shift. What actually changes by the end. This is the point where people expect a dramatic transformation, a surge of confidence, a permanent calm. That expectation itself belongs to the old way of thinking. What actually changes is quieter, but far more reliable. You do not become fearless. You become less confused by fear. You do not gain certainty about the future. You stop demanding it. The mind no longer races to resolve what cannot yet be resolved. It returns to what is immediately available, your judgment, your intention, your next right action. Under pressure, something new appears. Space. A pause between stimulus and response that did not exist before. In that pause, choice becomes possible. You think more clearly because your thoughts are no longer hijacked by urgency. You feel emotion without being swallowed by it. Anxiety may still arise, but it no longer dictates the direction of your day. This is what the Stoics meant by inner freedom. Not comfort, but coherence. Your inner world stops pulling itself apart. Attention gathers instead of scattering. You feel steadier, not because life has softened, but because you have stopped fighting it in the wrong places. What changes most is your relationship with uncertainty. It no longer feels like a threat that must be neutralized. It becomes a condition you know how to stand within, and once this shift settles, you begin to sense what remains to be integrated, not as theory, but as a way of moving through ordinary life without breaking apart. Living without breaking apart. This understanding only matters if it lives with you beyond reflection. It must appear in ordinary moments, when conversations become tense, when plans fall apart, when waiting tests your patience, when uncertainty refuses to give answers. This is where Stoicism stops being philosophy and becomes posture. You begin to notice yourself sooner, a tightening in the chest, a rush to conclude, an urge to control the direction of events, and instead of following it blindly, you pause. You return to what depends on you, your tone, your judgment, your willingness to respond rather than react. In this return, dignity is preserved. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself in Meditations of Marcus Aurelius, Book 6, paragraph 30, that the tranquility of the soul comes from ordering one's thoughts and actions according to nature and reason, not from arranging the world to one's liking. This ordering does not make life smaller. It makes it manageable. Setbacks no longer feel like personal insults. Waiting becomes tolerable because your worth is no longer tied to speed. Uncertainty loses its power to destabilize because you are no longer asking it to give what it cannot give. You meet each moment with a quieter confidence, rooted not in control, but in self-governance. This is not emotional hardness. It is emotional maturity. You still care, you still feel, but you are no longer pulled apart by what you cannot command. Strength settles in, not as tension, but as balance. Calm without numbness. Acceptance without resignation. A way of living that does not require you to break yourself in order to endure life.